There is a change that begins not with a celebration, but with a profound and unsettling quiet. It's the silence that follows the last crashing wave of a storm you thought would never end. You stand on the shore, not to a parade, but to a deep, pervasive stillness, and you realize the landscape of your soul has been permanently altered. You can't name the exact day it happened. There is no certificate, no ceremony, but you feel it in your bones. The things that used to hijack your nervous system now barely register. The opinions that once shackled you have lost their weight. The future, once a source of dread, feels like an open field, not a threatening maze. If you are here, sensing this new geography within yourself, then this is your confirmation. We are going to explore, in great depth, the 7 definitive markers that prove you have not only survived the deepest initiation of your life, but have graduated from it. The test was never about the chaos you endured. The real, lasting test is in the architecture of the person who remains after the chaos has receded. Sign 1. Solitude has shifted from a punishment to a sanctuary. Let's begin with the most intimate relationship you will ever have, the one with yourself. For much of our lives, being alone is a state we medicate. We conflate solitude with loneliness, a barren emptiness to be filled with noise, with people, with the endless scroll of digital distraction. We fear the empty room because in that room there is only one voice, one presence to confront, our own. We have been taught to avoid this meeting at all costs, but after the soul's great passage, a fundamental renegotiation occurs. You stop running from the quiet. You begin, almost instinctively, to cultivate it. You notice it in the sacred, mundane choices. You leave your phone in another room for an hour, not as a discipline, but as a desire. You take the long way home, driving in silence, listening to your own thoughts instead of a podcast. You savor a meal alone, truly tasting the food, feeling no need to perform or entertain an invisible audience. You protect an empty Saturday not out of obligation but with the tenderness of a gardener protecting a seedling. This is not loneliness. This is homecoming. It is the moment you become your own host. From a psychological standpoint, this signifies a monumental shift of psychic energy. The libido, the life force that Jung described, once frantically projected outward in search of validation, applause, and identity through others, begins a conscious withdrawal. It returns home. The ego, which once needed constant reflection in the eyes of others to feel real, learns to generate its own light. It discovers it can exist without an audience. The philosopher Kierkegaard wrote that the crowd is untruth. In the crowd, the individual is diluted, their responsibility diffused. True becoming, he argued, requires a courageous return to the singular. Your newfound comfort in solitude is that courageous return. You are no longer diluted. You are becoming concentrated. I worked with a man, a former executive whose identity was entirely wrapped in his title, his busy schedule, his network of contacts. When he took an early retirement, he entered a panic. The silence of his home felt like a vacuum sucking the meaning from his life. He described a physical anxiety when sitting in his study with nothing to do, but slowly, through what felt like sheer endurance, something shifted. He began to hear, beneath the anxiety, a faint hum of curiosity. He picked up a forgotten woodworking tool. He started taking pre-dawn walks. He told me, the silence didn't fill up. I did. I expanded to meet it. Now, I guard those quiet hours like they are the most important meetings of my week. When solitude becomes sanctuary, you detox from using distraction as an emotional anesthetic. You can allow a wave of grief or anxiety to crest and fall within you without immediately reaching for your phone. the television, or a substance to blunt its edge. You learn to be with what is. This is where true integration happens, not in avoiding the difficult inner material, but in developing the capacity to host it. You forge a friendship with yourself that is based on presence, not performance. And from this foundation of inner fullness, every external relationship is transformed. You no longer approach others as a beggar seeking the bread of validation. You approach as a whole person, offering from your abundance. If you find yourself craving and fiercely protecting your own company, you are standing on the unshakable ground of a spirit that has come home to itself. Sign 2. You trade the blame game for the meaning-making machine. Once you are grounded in your own being, your perception of the external world undergoes a radical, quiet revolution. This is the second sign. You lose the compulsion to keep a ledger of blame. In the wounded state, pain must have a perpetrator. Heartbreak is their betrayal. Professional stagnation is their sabotage. Financial struggle is the system's fault. This blame serves a temporary psychological purpose. It organizes chaos. It creates a simple, painful story with a clear villain and a noble, wronged victim, you. It gives the suffering a shape and a name outside of yourself. But after your inner trial, this need simply dissolves. It isn't that you muster heroic forgiveness. It's that you begin to perceive a larger, more intricate pattern. You start to see people and events not merely as causes of pain, but as messengers bearing coded letters for your soul. Your focus shifts from "who did this to me" to "what is this here to show me?" A conflict with a coworker becomes less about their incompetence and more about your own need to articulate boundaries or refine your communication. A romantic rejection transforms from a story of your unlovability into a lesson about the difference between attachment and authentic connection. You begin to understand that everyone who crosses your path is an actor in the grand, unconscious play of your own awakening, delivering lines meant to trigger your next evolution. Jung's dictum, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves, moves from an intellectual concept to a lived, bodily truth. Imagine your psyche as a vast, ancient castle. Many of its rooms have been locked for decades, shrouded in dust and shadow. Other people are like visitors who, by their very presence and behavior, unknowingly wander up to certain doors and knock. If their knock sends you into a rage or a spiral of shame, it's not because the visitor is malicious. It's because they have arrived at a door you have barricaded, a room inside yourself you have been afraid to enter. Your intense reaction is the signal. Pay attention. Something behind this door requires your light. A woman once shared with me her lifelong pattern of feeling used by friends. She had a long list of grievances. Through therapy, she had a piercing insight. She was an expert at offering help, but utterly incapable of receiving it or stating her own needs. She attracted users because her entire persona was built on being the indispensable giver. Her resentment was not truly about them. It was about her own disowned vulnerability and her hidden belief that she was only valuable for what she could provide. When she saw this, the blame toward her friends evaporated. It was replaced by a compassionate curiosity toward the part of herself that felt she had to earn love through service. You begin to operate from the understanding that no one is ultimately against you. They are, often entirely unconsciously, acting for your development, mirroring back the exact lessons your soul has contracted to learn in this lifetime. Your emotional reactions cease to be prison sentences and become your most trusted, albeit harsh, guides. This shift from a paradigm of blame to a practice of meaning-making is the very essence of emotional and spiritual sovereignty. It means you have reclaimed authorship of your life's narrative. Sign 3. You develop a solemn gratitude for your scars. From this empowered place of seeking meaning, your gaze turns, gently but firmly, toward your own past. And here we encounter the third, most counterintuitive sign. You feel a deep, solemn reverence for the very wounds that once seemed to define you. This is not the glossy, forced positivity of everything happens for a reason. It is a hard, won, somber gratitude. It is the archaeologist's respect for the shard of pottery, seeing not just a broken piece, but a clue to an entire civilization that existed. You recognize that the very fractures in your being have become the channels through which depth, compassion, and wisdom now flow. Before the passage, your personal history reads like a casualty report. My childhood broke my trust. That relationship ruined my ability to love. The language is one of permanent damage, of a self permanently diminished. After the passage, the lexicon changes. My childhood taught me fierce self-reliance. That relationship initiated me into the difference between infatuation and true intimacy. The narrative becomes one of alchemical transformation. You begin to perceive a hidden, guiding intelligence in the sequence of your life, as if your soul chose a curriculum perfectly designed for its own expansion. The loss you thought would end you created the necessary vacuum for a more authentic passion to rush in. The betrayal burned away your naive trust, forcing you to build a more sophisticated, discerning faith. The period of profound disorientation shattered your old map, compelling you to learn navigation by the stars of your own intuition. In the hero's journey, this is the boon or the elixir the hero brings back from the abyss. The treasure is not something external. It is the wisdom forged in the descent itself. The wound is the birthplace of the gift. I recall a client, a gifted artist, who had given up her craft after a scathing critique from a respected mentor years prior. She carried the story, "I am not a real artist. I was fooling myself." In our work, she revisited that wound, not as a verdict, but as a teacher. She saw that the critique, however harsh, had exposed a genuine insecurity in her technical skill, a gap she had been avoiding. More importantly, it revealed that her artistic identity was perched precariously on external validation. That painful event, she realized, wasn't the end of her art. It was the necessary death of her fragile, ego-based artist persona. It forced her to ask, do I create because I need to be seen as an artist, or because the act of creation is my soul's native language? She returned to her studio, not for acclaim, but for communion. The wound became the cornerstone of her authentic practice. When you can look upon your scars not with flinching shame, but with a kind of sacred respect for their role in your forging, you know you have passed a critical threshold. The past loses its haunting power because you have become the sovereign interpreter of its meaning. You are no longer a prisoner of your history. You are the scholar of your own becoming. Sign 4. You cultivate an inner citadel that chaos cannot breach. What is the tangible daily experience of this inner alchemy? How does it manifest when life inevitably throws its curveballs? This brings us to the fourth sign. External turbulence ceases to dictate your internal weather. You have built an inner citadel, a fortress of peace that no outer storm can besiege. There was a time when a terse email could unravel your entire afternoon. A canceled plan could trigger feelings of abandonment. A minor financial hiccup could spiral into visions of catastrophe. Your inner world was a shallow pond, and every pebble of external drama created disruptive, wide-reaching ripples. Now, something is fundamentally different. The pond has discovered it is connected to a deep underground aquifer. Storms may rage on the surface, demanding bosses, familial tensions, global uncertainty, but in the profound depths, there is a cool, still, and limitless reservoir of calm. You have accessed what the ancient Stoics called ataraxia, a state of serene tranquility, free from destructive passions. This is not emotional numbness or dissociation. It is the pinnacle of emotional regulation. Modern neuroscience validates this. Through consistent practices of mindfulness, self-inquiry, and nervous system regulation, we can literally rewire our brain's response to stress. The amygdala's hair trigger alarm system becomes less dominant. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of executive function, foresight, and wise response, becomes the more readily accessed commander. Your physiology begins to reflect your psychology. You are no longer a reactive creature. You become a responsive being. You begin to relate to your emotional states as you would to weather in the sky of your awareness. You are the sky itself, vast, open, inherently stable. Clouds of anger, rainstorms of grief, fog banks of anxiety may pass through. You observe them, you feel them, but you no longer mistake yourself for the temporary weather. You know the sky remains unchanged behind it all. This metacognitive awareness, the ability to observe yourself observing the emotion, is the key to liberation. I think of a CEO I advised who operated in a mercilessly volatile industry. He described his former self as a puppet with his strings pulled by every market shift and boardroom drama. After a health scare forced him to confront his own mortality, he dedicated himself to building this inner citadel. During a subsequent, company-threatening crisis, his leadership team was in panic mode. He walked into the war room, took a deliberate breath, and said, "Okay, let's look at the facts, separate from the fear. What is the first, most rational step?" His calm was not passive, it was powerfully containing. It gave his team the psychological safety to think clearly. Later, he told me, I finally realized my most important job wasn't to have all the answers. It was to be the calmest person in the room. The answers emerge from that calm. This is ultimate empowerment, when you are no longer internally hostage to external chaos. You become its master, not by controlling the uncontrollable, but by impeccably stewarding your own inner state. If you find yourself navigating crises with a breath, a pause, and a clarity that once seemed impossible, you are living from this deep, still center. You have become unshakable. Sign 5. Your heart opens with the wisdom of the wounded healer. Here lies one of the most beautiful paradoxes of profound growth. Conventional wisdom suggests that after deep pain, the heart should logically contract, harden, and fortify its walls to ensure it is never breached again. And for a season of healing, this protective closure is necessary and wise. But the fifth sign of a spirit that has truly passed through the fire is this: it does not remain closed. It dares to open again. But this time, it opens with the profound wisdom of the wounded healer. Your compassion deepens into something vast, quiet, and discerning. You no longer look upon the suffering of others from a safe, detached distance. You recognize the particular shade of ache in their eyes because you have dwelled in that same emotional territory. Your empathy is born of shared citizenship in the land of loss, not from textbook sympathy. This compassion is also fiercely intelligent. It is not a naive, self-sacrificing kindness that tolerates disrespect. It is a strong, clear love that understands boundaries are the very architecture of healthy connection. You can say no with as much love as you say yes, because you understand that you cannot pour from an empty cup, and that enabling another's dysfunction is not love, but codependence. We see this archetype embodied in figures like the psychologist Alice Miller, who dedicated her life to understanding the roots of childhood trauma. Her work wasn't born from detached academic interest. It was forged in the fire of her own repressed pain. Her heart opened through the understanding of her own wounds, and in doing so, she became a healing voice for millions. The wounded healer does not heal because they are perfect. They heal because they have intimately known the territory of brokenness and have found a path through. Your own relational world begins to transform from the inside out. You naturally, almost magnetically, gravitate away from transactional, surface-level bonds. You are drawn to depth, to authenticity, to people who can hold complexity and contradiction. Conversations become less about gossip and more about meaning. You find yourself able to release relationships that have reached their natural conclusion with a sense of grace and closure, free from bitter drama. You understand that not every connection is meant for a lifetime. Some are beautiful, necessary chapters. This open-heartedness becomes your greatest strength and your most magnetic quality. Without preaching or proclaiming, your presence communicates a deep permission. It's safe here. You can be messy here. I see you. You become a sanctuary for others because you have learned to be a sanctuary for yourself. If you find your heart softening, becoming more generous and yet more discerning as you move through the world, know this is the most credible evidence that your healing is genuine and complete. A broken heart stays barricaded. A healed heart learns the courageous art of selective, wise openness. Sign 6. You exchange the tyranny of certainty for the freedom of flow. With an open heart and a still center, you approach life's ultimate mystery, the unfolding future. This brings us to the 6th sign. You relinquish the exhausting, desperate need for certainty and learn to dance in the creative flow of the unknown. The immature psyche demands a detailed map. It craves guarantees, ironclad 5-year plans, and promises. It confuses predictability with safety. But life, in its essence, is a dynamic, improvisational, and inherently uncertain process. Clinging to certainty is like trying to hold a river in your hands. The tighter you grasp, the more it slips through your fingers, leaving you with nothing but anxiety. The spirit that has passed its trial discovers a different, more profound kind of security. It learns to trust its internal guidance system, its intuition, more than any external blueprint or societal script. This is the heart of what Jung meant by living in alignment with the self, the transcendent center of the total personality. You begin to follow a subtle feeling of rightness, a sense of being in the groove or the flow, even when the logical mind protests that the path is unclear. Envision yourself as a sailor on a vast ocean at night. You cannot see the horizon, but you have learned to read the stars. You can feel the wind on your skin and sense the current beneath your hull. You trust these subtle cues more than your fear of the dark. You understand that the ocean itself is your medium, not your enemy, and that it will carry you if you learn its rhythms and cooperate with its forces. This stage is often marked by an increase in synchronicities, those meaningful coincidences that feel too perfect to be random. You think of an old friend, and they call minutes later. You stumble upon a book whose title answers a question you've been holding. You take a wrong turn and end up meeting someone who opens a new door for you. You no longer dismiss these as luck. You recognize them as winks from the universe, confirmations that you are listening, paying attention, and moving in harmony with a larger, intelligent pattern. A former client of mine, a meticulous corporate lawyer, had her life upended by a burnout-induced sabbatical. In the void left by her structured career, she was terrified. Instead of forcing a new plan, she experimented. She followed tiny intuitions, to volunteer at a community garden, to take a poetry class online, to have a coffee with an acquaintance who worked in environmental law. Each small, illogical step felt alive. This thread of aliveness, followed with trust, led her within 2 years to a leadership role at a non-profit focused on climate justice, work that filled her with a purpose her prestigious law career never had. "I didn't find my path," she said. "I learned to follow a feeling." The path revealed itself one trusting step at a time. When you can sit in the fertile ground of "I don't know yet," when you can take a step forward, not because the destination is guaranteed, but because your inner compass gives a gentle pull, you have achieved a sublime and adult freedom. Uncertainty is no longer a terrifying void. It is the creative space where possibility is born. If you feel a new, almost adventurous ease with life's unanswered questions, you are dancing this elegant, trusting dance with the unknown. Sign 7. Your identity is rooted in wisdom, not in wound. This entire journey converges into the final, most profound sign. The 7th sign is this: you cease to introduce yourself to the world and, crucially, to yourself by your injuries. Your identity is no longer primarily the survivor of that trauma, the victim of that betrayal, or the person who overcame that illness. Your identity is now anchored in the wisdom, depth, and compassion those experiences excavated in you. This is the complete and sacred rewrite of your personal myth. You transition from a narrative of damage and defense to a narrative of awakening and offering. You are not the shattered vase, desperately held together by glue. You are the unique, beautiful pattern of light that is now refracted through those very cracks. The breaks are no longer the primary story. They are part of the history that gives your light its particular, complex, and breathtaking quality. You look back upon your former selves, the angry adolescent, the desperate people-pleaser, the heartbroken lover, not with judgment or shame, but with a tender, almost parental compassion. You see a soul doing its brave, fumbling best with the consciousness and tools available at the time. You grant yourself a retroactive grace that is the hallmark of true self-forgiveness. In Jung's framework, this is the flowering of individuation, the lifelong process of becoming the unique, integrated individual you were meant to be, by consciously marrying your conscious ego with the contents of the personal and collective unconscious. You no longer disown your shadow, your pettiness, your envy, your rage, your fear. You acknowledge these as parts of the whole human tapestry. You dialogue with them. You understand that your capacity for darkness is the twin of your capacity for light, and that integrating both is the source of true power and authenticity. From this place of wholeness arises a quiet, unshakable joy. It is not the bubbly excitement of a temporary victory. It is the subterranean gladness of being utterly, undeniably yourself. It's the peace of no longer being at war with your own story. It is the simple, profound happiness of a tree that has weathered storms and now stands, deep-rooted, enjoying the sun simply because it is there. You become a different kind of presence. People may not articulate it, but they feel steadier in your company. You radiate a non-anxious, grounded energy. You have, without fanfare, become a lighthouse, not by shouting guiding instructions, but simply by standing firm on your rock, With your light steadily burning, your very being communicates a silent, powerful message to those still in their storms. Hold on. The ground exists. The dawn comes. I am proof, conclusion, and integration. These 7 signs are not badges to be worn on your chest. They are subtle, internal confirmations, a changed chemistry of the soul. They are felt in the patience with which you listen, in the ease with which you decline what doesn't align, in the gentle firmness of your boundaries, and in the deep sleep that now comes to you even on the eve of a challenging day. If you recognize these shifts within you, please pause and honor the monumental, silent labor your spirit has accomplished. You have been the alchemist in the dark, turning the lead of pain into the gold of wisdom. You have been the sailor who stayed at the helm through the night and now knows the stars by heart. You have been the architect who, using the rubble of old collapses, built a more beautiful and resilient inner structure. You did not just endure your trials, you metabolized them. You allowed them to transform you at the cellular level of your being. The war for your soul is over. The peace you feel is not a truce, it is a victory. You are no longer a character buffeted by the plot of your life. You have become the author, the editor, and the compassionate reader of your own sacred text. This is maturity. This is integration. This is the quiet, powerful arrival home. Welcome.